The Republican politicians are like, oh, no way. Black people should be arrested at 4 times the rate of white people. We're not changing our thing.
Why are we paying police this much money every year to kill people? Why are they trained less than a baker? Why can just about anyone become a cop?
First of all, Chauvin killed George Floyd. He did it in a brutal way. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about that.
If you take human rights away, when you take humanitarianism out of the equation, people are going to get radical. No amount of drugs in his system, no amount of crime in his past, nothing justifies a cop doing this to a civilian. Cenk Uygur had an engaging conversation with Tim Pool, who seemed eager to take up a multitude of right-wing positions as they touched on some interesting topics, and Cenk overall did a good job presenting his argument and laying out the facts, and I wanted to look at some of the best moments here, first being where him and Tim discussed the differences between the left and the right.
So one is we believe in expanding the circle of liberty. And so you might think like, whoa, no, man, right wing's liberty, right? Are you? Because like we think that gay people and trans people and Muslims and everyone else should have the same exact rights. And oftentimes the right wing goes, nah, not really. I mean, I think trans people should be separated out here and here and here, etc. Then you've got justice for all. And again, you would say, well, what do you mean? Justice? Of course, we're all for justice. Are you? Because right now, black people and white people smoke pot at the same rates, and black people get arrested at 4 times the rate. The Republican politicians are like, oh, no way. Black people should be arrested at 4 times the rate of white people. We're not changing a goddamn thing.
They're not literally saying that.
Okay.
But I see your point.
Yes. But they are through their legislation. You're right. They're not saying that quote. And the last one is equality of opportunity.
I think Cenk does an amazing job of summing this up perfectly. Equal liberties, justice for all, and equal opportunities are 3 core focuses that anyone on the left would agree with, despite our differences, while on the right, seemingly they're more focused on liberty through removing regulations and things of that nature. See, equality can be summed up in 2 ways: positive and negative liberties. While lefties, correctly in my opinion, focus on positive liberties, you can think of this as having equal opportunity to act, Republicans seem to focus more on negative liberties, like everyone having the equal amount of restrictions that prevent them from acting. And ideally to Republicans, this would be 0. Let's use an example of owning a bakery, right? Are you more free, in your opinion, to start a bakery if there wasn't a monetary barrier to prevent you from doing so? Or if there were no restrictions like franchising or zoning laws in terms of regulations that prevented you from just opening a bakery out of your home if you wanted to? Supporters of positive liberty would say the first. These are generally reached through some sort of social welfare. For our bakery example, right, guaranteeing positive liberty could look like loans that are given out no matter your financial status, or a fund that anyone could pull from if they wanted to start a bakery. Supporters of negative liberty, however, would choose the second option. This would look more like removing, say, the zoning laws for requiring a building and the spaces and franchising and things like that. Maybe there's only a certain amount of bakeries allowed in your city. It would be removing all of these requirements, certificates, and things like that that are required for you to start. This gets rather problematic for, well, a few reasons, but for one, if you're too poor to start a bakery, you're not really any more free to do so because these restrictions are removed, are you? Like being placed in the middle of the desert with no laws, with no one to police you, you're technically as free as possible, but does that grant you any additional ability to act? Are you going to be able to act on any of your desires that way? Lefties more so want to focus on that, your opportunity to act, rather than just removing regulations that really are ever only going to favor those who are already privileged or already have that opportunity to do so. And this defines lefties more so because we want to extend this to everyone, black, white, gay, straight, trans, it doesn't matter, while Republicans say that you have to draw the line somewhere, and they generally try to mask this behind saying this is how you guarantee equal freedoms for everyone. You know, your freedoms can't supersede mine, like gay marriage, for instance. And I personally would agree with that sentiment, right? Your freedom shouldn't overtake the baseline of positive liberty that we guarantee everyone. For instance, marriage is something that we allow in this society. The best way to guarantee a baseline of freedom for everyone is everyone in this country is then allowed to be married. If there's a kind of couple that you don't want to marry, specifically you, then you're free to not marry anyone. You cannot be someone who holds marriage ceremonies. But expecting these people to jump through hoops, vet people, hope they support them, and want to uphold their freedoms, and just for your beliefs to supersede theirs is asinine. And this is where right-wingers get it wrong, in my opinion, on where they direct their focuses. The focus should be on leveling the class divide. This is the best way to guarantee equal opportunity for everyone, is to add in amenities that help bridge the gap between classes that is getting harder and harder to cross nowadays than it ever has been before. This means things like free college, so everyone can have access to the better jobs it provides. Free healthcare, so people aren't dying in the street or scared of dying and having to expend so much of their checks just to get basic care. Some sort of socialized housing and childcare, so having a child isn't such a financially crippling event that people are scared of doing it because of the burden that comes with it financially. A robust welfare system and a progressive tax structure to fund it, from each according to their ability to each according to their need. These are things that as Americans we should come together and realize is in our best interest, right? Us against corporations is the real battle, regardless of partisanship, to support these things as it's best for the American people, for civilians as a whole. Invest in ourselves, invest in these communities that have been torn down, and watch them grow back better and more beautiful than ever before. Next, I want to look at a clip that's right after Tim tries to conflate low-level political intimidation to terrorism, and then makes an absolutely wild claim afterwards. Here, take a look.
What you're talking about is cultural domination. And is that true in Berkeley, that the left dominates in a way that is oppressive to the right? Like
it's not the right. I'm talking about
no, I get it.
Asian salon owners.
No, I know, and to the middle as well, right? Yes, but is it also true that you'll get the same kind of cultural domination in the middle of Alabama? So if you're in the middle of Alabama and you put up a Trump sucks sign, you are going to have massive problems.
You will not get someone coming to your house and threatening to kill you.
You're nuts. Yes, you will.
Okay, so this is crazy to double down on, right? There was a woman shot over a pride flag in her business window. There was a man whose neighbor shot him just because he thought he was a Democrat. Signs getting shot up. I mean, these events are ever so present and happen daily, right? Like, I was chased down one time by a car because I yelled out my window, "Trump sucks," and they did a 180 in the street and followed me home. You have to be able to admit that this is something that is present on both sides. You should be objective here, not biased. And the cult mentality is by far worse on the right. The way that conservatives flock together and try to defend anything, and the lengths that they will go to do so, is insane. It's actual insanity, right? Like, it's something that can't be explained. There will be case studies on it 50 years in the future, I swear, right? But here is Tim Cast and Cenk on the George Floyd case.
Serious disinformation coming out of what happened with George Floyd. People fear terrorism.
It's not disinformation, brother. I mean, we all saw it.
Well, no, we need to clarify what I mean by disinformation.
Okay,
I'm not saying. So obviously, the dude Chauvin put his knee on the guy's neck, and this general area is like covering a large portion of his back.
First of all, Chauvin killed George Floyd. He did it in a brutal way. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about that at all.
Have you read the coroner's report?
Yeah, and what happens, Tim, is that sometimes people die because they can't breathe because you cut off the flow of oxygen. And sometimes they die and they say they can't breathe. It's because they have a heart condition or some other condition. And when you compress long enough, they literally have the feeling that they can't breathe, and then they die. I
don't disagree. Of course. But did you watch the full body camera footage from start to finish of how it all went down?
I believe I did in that case.
It's a moral dilemma. And I think
it's not at all a moral dilemma. It's not.
It absolutely is.
So Tim, you could drag him out of the car. You can't sit on his neck for 9 minutes, brother. That's obvious.
I agree. I completely agree.
Don't fight that. That is terrible. It's murder.
I'm not saying that specific incident is the moral dilemma. I'm saying the entirety of the circumstance brings us to a bunch of serious questions that must be answered that have not been.
Yeah, this is a terrible look. Trying to play this out as if it's some morally just act is just disgusting. He wasn't fighting back when the knee was on his neck, regardless of what happened in the car, what he said 20 minutes before, or the fact that he was breaking the law. He was verbally shouting that he could not breathe. The cop stayed on his neck for 9 minutes. No amount of drugs in his system, no amount of crime in his past, nothing justifies a cop doing this to a civilian. And as a civilian, you should agree with that. This was cut and dry murder, and we as the American people should be able to call it out as such without it being controversial or partisan or something. And I think that the inability to do so is deeply seated in racism or fascism, to just uphold police and you know, the authoritarianism at all costs in America. If you need to pull him out of the car, pull him out of the car, right? You cross into the wrong very clearly when you place yourself on a man's neck and he's not resisting once you do so, and he's screaming to you to get off because he can't breathe, and you stay on his neck for 9 minutes. I think that's pretty clearly murder. He was found guilty in a court of law for a reason. I hate this kind of weaseling around trying to say, hey, I'm not saying it's right, but you know, you're dog whistling to extreme right-wingers and racists that want you to do exactly this because they probably fund your show, while adding in the caveat that's like, well, you know, I said it's wrong. I said it's wrong, but, you know, there's some questions that need answers. Like, it does bring up some questions that need answers, just not the ones that you mean here. Like, why are we paying police this much money every year to kill people? Why are they trained less than a fucking baker? Why can just about anyone become a cop? These are questions that need to be asked, but the insinuations that he's making just add fuel to the fire that is the police injustice, police violence that we've seen for the last years, decades, centuries towards people of color and minority groups. That was the exact cause of the riots and the protests and the events circulating 2020 and the George Floyd instance that he despises so much, are because of these kinds of things. If you take human rights away, when you take humanitarianism out of the equation, people are going to get radical. People are going to get extreme because there is nowhere else to look. There's nowhere else to turn. This is how things work. It shouldn't be controversial to lock up a cop who killed a black dude, to crucify him, to say he's a bad person who did wrong. It shouldn't be something that we're pointing at like, but, you know, but there's no caveats for murder. It's unnecessary. Let's end this clip, this rant, with Cenk's justification as to why he will actually be able to run for president and should be considered a legitimate candidate.
Can't you read, man? It's in the Constitution. It says right there you have to be native born. Yeah, that's in the original Constitution. And right next to it is the clause that says that black people are 3/5 of a person. Well, can't you read, man? It's in the Constitution. It's right there, man. Yeah, but there's a thing called amendments that amend the Constitution. So that part got amended out, the 3/5 part. Obviously, tons of the Constitution got amended out. And the natural born citizen thing was amended out by the 14th Amendment. So the 14th Amendment says very, very clearly, anyone who is born or naturalized has due process and equal protection of the laws.
Now, I do want to note it is unclear whether this would hold up in court or if the Supreme Court would back it, which does sort of put an asterisk on his run, but the theory he's running with does seem pretty sound, and I personally don't disagree with the logic. I mean, our Constitution was made by racist, xenophobic, misogynistic homophobes who thought black people were less than a person. Maybe they were wrong about some other things too. You know, I'm sorry to say. I don't see the problem with someone who has lived here their whole life running for president just because they weren't born here. Like, just make it like a 30-year citizen requirement or something if you're that worried. Like, it's silly to think that someone, just because they were born in another country, if they were lived here 40 years, 50 years, were raised here, that they're any less American. That's just xenophobic. If you enjoyed this video, we're Social Society. We're a commentary channel based in politics, society, and the economy. We are pretty left-leaning on this channel, but we're open to our right-wingers as well. The biggest thing here is having conversations that get everyone to the bottom of the truth. If that sounds like something that could interest you, consider smashing that like button, leaving us a comment, or even subscribing to the channel, because the only way we become a society is together.